Well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and have you ever wondered what it would be like to travel back in time, meet your younger self, and realize just what an annoying brat you really were as a kid? Well, this is a movie that explores just that. The Adam Project, starring Ryan Reynolds, just dropped on Netflix, so let's talk about it. So I'll be totally honest. This is not a movie that I've been anticipating or counting down the days to or looking forward to. I don't think I'd even seen a trailer for this thing until about a week before this thing dropped. This thing just sort of showed up on Netflix. Currently, it's the number one movie on Netflix. So it features a kind of an all-star cast of kind of big name people like Ryan Reynolds, Jennifer Garner, Mark Ruffalo. So this is a big movie. It's kind of a Netflix original. It's not going in theaters or anything. So, and it features sort of material, kind of that sci-fi, kind of more, it looked like kind of a throwback, like Spielbergian kind of family flick, dealing with time travel. It's all the kind of stuff that normally I just eat up in a movie because I'm a geek just like that. So I was relatively excited to check this thing out the other day. And whoa boy, this is the Adam Project is definitely a movie. This is maybe one of the moviest movies I have seen in quite a long time, and I don't mean in like a this was cinema kind of way, but just that this whole movie feels extremely artificial and kind of manufactured and mechanical in a way. Like you, even as I was watching this, you get the feeling that you're watching a movie. Kind of almost ironically for a movie that is about like transporting characters like through space and time, that the movie just never seems to be able to like transport, or at least for myself viewing this movie, kind of into this like believable fiction where you feel like you're watching a story, not just sort of watching like the script. Like you can almost see some of like the script cues and notes and stuff jumping off the screen. Nothing feels natural. Like the dialogue doesn't feel natural. It feels very like rehearsed and kind of recited, almost like it's like a theater performance. Even like a lot of the ideas and stuff. Like you can see exactly what this film is trying to go for and accomplish. And I think the fact that you can really see that jumping off the page is a problem in this movie. And I would say kind of overall, again, this is just my own opinion on this movie. People can have different opinions on this, but this movie feels very much like a first draft of a decent movie. It has potential. It has some interesting ideas. Kind of what it's going for, I think, is interesting. It has a cast that should be able to carry a movie like this, but just nothing feels finished. It feels very like they ran a camera in like the rehearsal before they started filming, and COVID shut things down, so they just decided to go with that take or something like that. But I just never found myself like actually pulled into the movie and like the story that was being told. And kind of the basic premise of this is actually pretty interesting, although it's obviously it's very much, it's not like a very fresh or original. There's been lots of movies like this, but time travel exists. Turns out it's not a good thing. It's destroying the world. So kind of a ruggish, handsome pilot, Mr. Ryan Reynolds, has to travel back through time to try and stop time travel from being invented, kind of undo the invention to save the future. Kind of along the way, he takes some detours, picks up his like 12 or 13-year-old younger kind of teenage self, and kind of the two of them kind of go on this buddy adventure movie, kind of working with each other, kind of getting to know each other, which I guess in a way is getting to know yourself along the way. And really that premise, although it is kind of simple, it is an interesting premise, and you can see where they could have done a lot with it. But the movie and the filmmakers just it seems like they can never figure out exactly how to kind of build off that in any kind of interesting or meaningful ways. And I think it's kind of interesting that this film's coming kind of on the heels of Matt Reeves' Batman movie, The Batman, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. Because whereas kind of the Batman excelled, whether you like the movie or not, I think it excels because it has a clear identity. It knows exactly what kind of movie it wants to be, and it executes that. And again, if you don't, it might not be for you, you might not like that identity, but I don't think there's any question that it delivers what it's trying to do. And the Adam Project is very much the opposite of that. This is a movie that just seems like it has no idea what it wants to be. It kind of casts itself almost as this like real kind of family friendly, fun kind of kiddie adventure. But it's also just like filled with just a ton of profanity, a lot of like angsty, kind of more emotional drama stuff. Like the action really doesn't start. Like the villains and stuff don't even show up till almost like 40 minutes into this thing. And before that, it's just a lot of kind of more serious drama. Kind of another example, it kind of feels like at times this thing's is kind of going for like that self-aware, like James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy, like in some of like the action scenes, like they're playing kind of like the rock and roll songs, and it's supposed to kind of be like, you know, hey, this is sort of lighthearted. We know it's silly, but it's fun, and it seems like it's kind of going for that. But in doing that, it kind of feels half-hearted, and even like the way because they don't commit hard to sort of that vibe. That at least to me, it almost felt like kind of like the older aging dad that's like using like hip lingo like his kids, like is trying to be sort of this pop culture thing like James Gunn has been able to pull off, but it just never gets there. And even the time travel is another example where this film just struggles to know what it wants to do with it. And kind of in general with most time travel movies, there's kind of two ways you can go about it. The first way is just like, hey, doesn't really make sense. It's just a movie. Just enjoy it. Go with it. We don't need to explain it. Here's some mumbo jumbo science, and now let's have action. You can kind of do that, or you can like really try and ground it and like explain it and be a more like realistic scientific movie. And the Adam part, it kind of feels like it's at least it starts off kind of being the first, where Ryan Reynolds' character kind of says like, hey, you're thinking too hard, like you've watched way too many movies, just go with it, just come along on this adventure, you don't need to understand it. So it kind of seems like that's what it's going to do, and it's just going to be some fun adventure that obviously has like plot holes and doesn't make sense about time travel. But then it doesn't really follow its own advice. Like this movie has so much exposition and explaining, and characters is almost every like scene in this movie, the characters have to stop at some point and like kind of give this monologue trying to explain what would happen with the time, and even like all the way to like the third act, like when they're in the action trying to solve this big battle and stuff, like the characters are still stopping in the middle of the action and just sort of going on for like 2 minutes about time travel, and well, if we do this, then this timeline, and our fixed time that we'll go back to, and I just found myself saying like, I don't care, like this thing doesn't need to make sense to me. There's like space ninja guys from the future on hoverboards, like I'm fine with that. This be that kind of fun adventure movie. But this film, it so badly kind of wants to be, I guess, taken seriously, but it doesn't commit hard enough to be taken seriously, that it kind of falls in some weird middle ground where it's not really mature and like intelligent enough to be like a thought-provoking sci-fi flick, but it's not like just fun enough for audiences to like not care about the science and stuff and just go with it. And I think kind of all throughout, this is just a film that never is able to just figure out exactly what kind of movie it wants to be. You can kind of pick up some of the references and like the inspirations, and this Spielberg movie or Terminator, and they even like in the movie name drop these references that they're trying to go for. So you can kind of pick all that up, but this film just sort of throws it all in a blender, mixes it all up, and sort of shoots out some kind of sludge that really doesn't reflect any of those things. And almost from start to finish, this movie is just a bit of a failure. As far as content on the surface, this movie, kind of surprisingly, unlike most PG-13 movies, it seems, this movie doesn't use its one allowed F-bomb. A character does like mouth the word, so it's still there, but they don't speak it. But other than that, this film definitely has a lot of profanity. This is, I think I started trying to keep track as I was watching this for the sake of doing this review. And I think I finally just gave up at like 20 or 22, just sort of more minor profanities, S words and, OMGs. And, but this is all the time. And it kind of, it's not like to the level of like a real hard R comedy kind of profane movie. But for a movie like this, it just seemed way over the top and kind of unnecessary, and almost like it's trying to be kind of a cool movie that has profanity. And at least, as a Christian viewer watching this, it just seemed over the top. As far as violence, this film doesn't have violence. People kind of like fight and there's action, but it's all bloodless. Characters like bad guys, when they die, just sort of go off in like a puff of smoke and go back into the future, or whatever happens to them. So this is not a violent movie. And sexuality, there's no sexual scenes or gratuitous stuff. There's a couple like sexual like innuendos where people talk about male genitalia and jokes and stuff. So that happens a couple times throughout the movie, but no like sex scenes or anything kind of sensual like that. As far as the sort of themes kind of beneath the surface of this thing, again, this isn't a deep movie. There's not just tons of stuff to really wrestle with and get into as far as like worldviews and philosophies and some of that. But I do think one of the things that I did appreciate about this movie is that kind of for a film that's all about like time travel and going to different times, the film kind of at least tries to have like a message of just appreciating like the now, that, you know, we need to kind of live in the moment, and that there is sort of a time for everything, and we can't be kind of looking ahead. We can't just be looking back. We need to kind of embrace it, almost like Ecclesiastes, like, you know, in the Bible, chapter 3, there's a time for everything under the sun. It kind of reflects that vision. You see that the most with like the contrast of the two Adams, like the older version of Ryan Reynolds and the younger version. That kind of both of them, when they meet, are almost idolizing like the life of the other one. The young Adam is very the scrawny kid that gets bullied and just, you know, picked on at school. He's, you know, he has asthma. He's just he's very undersized, and you know, he kind of looks at like this buffed up, handsome Ryan Reynolds, like his future, and kind of, you know, almost idolizing that he's going to kind of get out of the stage of life he's in. And then kind of the opposite side of that, the older kind of Ryan Reynolds is this sort of jaded, cynical, that had a lot of like pain and hurt in his life. And he kind of looks at the younger version of himself as being kind of annoying, but also just like kind of longing for some of that innocence, some of the opportunity to go back and still have a healthy relationship with his mom, and played by Jennifer Gardner, and his father, and some of that. And it's kind of interesting. They don't, I don't necessarily think they develop that in like super profound ways, but it's definitely an interesting element that is throughout this movie, of just sort of kind of learning that, hey, you know, what matters is sort of living in the now, you know, to fix things in your life, you know, start by embracing the stage of life that you're in. So as a Christian, I do think there was some interesting stuff in there. And maybe another thing that we don't need to get into a whole bunch, but just the idea of like grief kind of plays a role in this movie. You know, the characters are kind of grieving over the loss of their father, which, as a time travel movie, their father is one of those characters that ends up being dead and alive in this movie. But it's sort of kind of dealing with grief, and kind of one of the advantages of like a time travel movie is that you're able to see the same characters at different stages of their life dealing with grief. And it's sort of an interesting kind of contrast of, hey, this is kind of the stages of grief, and that there's sort of moments you need to go through, and, you know, areas that you can't just get stalled out on. You do need to kind of keep moving. And the film kind of shows that with the character of Adam, but also with the mother character, and even to a degree the father character that has died, and kind of the tragic moment, that you kind of see kind of a wider perspective. Then again, I don't think necessarily what it does or what it has to say is always the most profound or interesting, but it's definitely a theme that is in there that I think Christians, really any viewers, can kind of wrestle with a little bit. So in the end, this is a movie that just did not land for me. I don't know, maybe I'm just being cynical about this thing. Maybe I was expecting something that this movie didn't deliver. But again, for me, either be a thought-provoking sci-fi movie or just being kind of a dumb, silly, fun adventure movie. But I think trying to do both of those things just end up kind of satisfying neither one of those desires for me. In the end, just sort of ended up being a complete miss. You know, time travel might be cool to go back and revisit the past experiences, but this is a movie that I will definitely not be going back to revisit. I don't think a whole lot of audiences are going to be remembering any echoes of this, you know, anywhere after the next week or two. It just seems like this is just a blip on the radar. But let me know if you guys have a different opinion. If you think I'm just too jaded and cynical and just need to enjoy sci-fi movies, let me know. I'd love to have a discussion about this, and maybe some of the themes that, if you know, there's some interesting stuff in this movie that you notice as far as like the worldviews and stuff, and you know, grief and living in the present, or some of those kind of biblical themes. Love to have a conversation about that with you guys about that. Most of all, guys, appreciate you guys checking out the review. Encourage you guys, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. Got a lot of stuff going on here at The Collision, other reviews, live streams, other just kind of fun videos that we come up with. So we'd love to have you guys join us for that. But most of all, guys, stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.